But I'm going to move on and introduce our next speaker. Mikko is a lecturer, I think is the right word to use, at Regent University here in London. And he is, again, I don't like to label people experts, but I'm going to, an expert, if you like, in strategic and management decision making. So I've asked Mikko to come and talk to us a little bit about how he is using mind mapping, but maybe a slightly broader definition of mapping in decision making. So Mikko, please come and tell us what you've found.
Well, thank you, Liam, for the introduction. I have a phobia, and that's technology. So, so bear with us for 1 minute till we... It is justified, absolutely right. Okay. So you just press play to see if that... Oh, good. Okay. Now, in terms of my presentation, I spend my days teaching students at university level about strategic management. And over the past 10 years since I've been doing that work, I have discovered that strategy is all about decision making. Okay? We can do all this sort of modeling and analysis, but it boils down to decision making. And a couple of years ago, I was at the London School of Economics when the Queen of England came in at the height of the financial crisis. And there were a number of eminent economists, mathematicians sitting in the audience. And economics is about predicting what might happen. And the Queen said, how can nobody saw this crisis coming? Okay? And we have all these various different models. And that started me thinking about how do we indeed make decisions? And mathematics doesn't seem to always work when we're talking about decisions that relate to uncertainty, ambiguity, and so on. So I started looking a bit more in terms of psychology. You know, how do people make decisions? And that took me in a very interesting road to mapping, visualizing decisions. And I came across a concept of causal mapping. And the initial premise is that actually we are very, very poor at making decisions. And I came across this guy called Peter Nutt in 2002, who's devoted his life studying decision-making in organizations. And he said that based on a number of analyses, about 250 decisions that he analyzed, about half of those decisions failed. And that's pretty bad, okay? We have all the mathematical models, probability theory, etc., 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 and still half of those decisions tend to fail. Okay? And that then took me to start thinking about the psychology of decision making. And I came across work by Daniel Kahneman, who won the Nobel Prize for Economics a couple of years ago, and he's a psychologist by training. And he said that there are two types of thinking. There's the system one thinking and system two thinking. And system one thinking is intuitive thinking, gut feel. Okay? When we have a decision problem, we almost immediately begin to think an answer or solution to that problem. Why? Because it's easy. We are conditioned to make decisions, flight or fright type thinking. And I'm going to just give an example of that. It takes about 3 seconds for us to decide if we like somebody or not when we meet them. Hello, how are you doing? And I like you or I don't like you. And once that decision has been made, it's very difficult to reverse. Now, when we think about business decisions, we are all being taught that we have to do what's known as system 2 thinking, rational thinking. We do the analysis and so on and so forth, but that's hard work. Do we like hard work? No. No, absolutely not. If I have an easy way of making a decision, I'd rather take that one. And what then tends to happen is that we have to appear to be going through the work. So we appear to do the analysis, but our mind has already been made up. And what Peter Nutt and Daniel Kahneman say is that there are a number of decision-making traps that come from the system 1 and system 2 thinking. And the most common traps are a rush to judgment. Okay? All right, it's been a good decision. You have a gut feel about that. So let's move on. Second one is that when we are looking at groups, if you sit around a table and you have to express your opinion, how comfortable are you dissenting? Most people are not. And why? Because we do not want to rock the boat. So what Peter Nutt found is that in business decisions, a low level of participation is about 20% of the case. People stay silent. The third one is a power or persuasion to comply that takes place in 60% of the time. A boss says, I've been thinking. I think it's a great idea. Don't you also think that way? And you nod. Yep, exactly. And the fourth one is that because the system 1 thinking has already led us to think about a solution, we begin to spend effort to find data to support the solution or the answer we have already made. Now, I bought a new car about 18 months ago. It's a Volkswagen. And I quite like Volkswagens. So I said, well, Mikko, let's do some rational thinking here. Okay? Let's get some data about Volkswagens. And I went to all kinds of websites and read reviews. And the only reviews I read were the ones that said that Volkswagen is a great car. Right? So I was creating myself in a rational way to make a decision that I already had made. Now, so those are the 4 key traps. And then on top of that, we have these cognitive biases that come from the system 1 thinking, heuristics. And what we tend to do in organizations, there's what's known as anchoring bias. What worked in the past is going to work in the future, right? We extrapolate. Now, future is unknowable. And the Queen said to the economists, how come nobody saw this coming? Well, the simple answer is that all the models were based on previous data. But future is not knowable. Second one, overconfidence bias. Let's do a straw poll. How many of you drive a car? Hands up. Just look around. Okay. How many of you think that you are above average driver? Hands up. I would suggest that's a statistical impossibility. Okay? Because what we tend to do is that we overestimate our individual capabilities, We overestimate the capabilities of our teams, and we overestimate the capabilities of our firms. And we underestimate the capabilities of our competitors. Okay? Serious bias. Escalation of commitment bias, known as the gambler's bias. I used to work in financial services on a trading floor. And if your position went against you, i.e. you began to lose money, what's the logical thing to do? Huh?
Go bigger.
Double up. Absolutely right. Rather than take your losses. That happens in organizations all the time. I'm going to have an investment in India. My payback is 5 years. On year 4, it doesn't work. I double up, and so on. So you have all these types of biases coming in. Now the question then comes, can mapping solve some of these issues? And in fact, it does. Because if you look at decisions, it's very difficult to say, well, how am I going to measure a decision I made today and how it might be turning in the future? Because the future is unknowable. But what I can do is to improve the quality of the decision-making process. And there are 2 things you need to do about that. One is increasing the level of cognitive conflict. And what that basically is how do you create debate? How do you open up a team to debate rather than stay quiet? The second thing is that if you create this conflict, you have a danger that it will spill into what's known as effective conflict. An effective conflict is that no longer the ideas are competing against each other, but it spills over to personal conflict. And that is the problem that most group decision-making situations face. Okay? That's why we stay quiet, because we do not want to rock the boat. Yeah. I know, that's my phobia. I don't know how to do that. I'm a dinosaur. But what I have done is on the Biggerplate website. You can download this. Okay? Okay. So what I have done is that I have looked at a map, what's known as an epistemic object, a map that just is made to use sense, to make sense of a situation. I do not follow any mind mapping conventions. And in fact, the people I have experimented this concept with, there's really no right or wrong way of doing the mapping in my research, I have found. And it's very simple post-it note map, a causal map that shows causation. If I do this, then these are the potential outcomes. So that gives you the mapping structure. But what's interesting is that the mapping process itself is all about increasing the quality of debate. So there's a lot of debate taking place when we map. And I'm not going to win the Nobel Prize for this, but what I have found is that the effective conflict is moderated. So people are willing to engage in very robust debate, exploring options, but it does not spill over to an effective conflict. And I'd like to play you, how much time do I have, please? Oh, good, okay. So let me play you a bit of video here. If I get this. this screen. Never mind. These are the 5 executives, and I have given them a little case study to do, and just a whiteboard, marker pens, and post-it notes. And I've asked them to make a decision. So I have a couple little snippets at different times of the construction. We don't have to have the sound. What's going on here? They are debating. Now look at how they address each other. What do you notice?
You're looking at the whiteboard and the points.
Yeah.
Then eyeball to eyeball.
Yeah. Although here, there is a lot of eye contact. And what I found is that the initial stage of the mapping, people actually do have the eye contact. And what do you think is the problem with that? Is confrontational. Exactly. So although the debate is going up, it may spill over into this affective conflict that can be destructive. Okay? So even if you make a decision, with the level of affective conflict, you may not have decision acceptance by all the people in a group. Okay? They feel forced into a decision. But if I then move on to a bit further down, let's see. Huh? Isn't that wonderful? I mean, think about the engagement here. It's quite amazing. And I analyzed these videos in fairly minute detail, and I can spot the time when the map becomes an extension of that group. And the mapping becomes the focal point of the debate and the discussion. It is no longer on a face-to-face basis. So what happens to the level of effective conflict at that point? It goes down. Debate up, effective conflict down. What happens to the quality of the decision-making process? Up. It's fantastic. Okay? And as I said, there are no rules and regulations how to do this mapping except show causation. Okay? So I'm a convert into mapping. Okay? I like to learn how to do mapping properly in terms of mind mapping, but in a context of working teams, what I have found is okay to do mapping poorly, because the map itself, the mapping process itself, is not the key issue. It is how do you use the map. It becomes a shock absorber. Okay. And in fact, I'm going to drop you into it. There's Dan here in the front, one of my best MBA students a couple of years ago. And he did his MBA dissertation on causal mapping. So if I could ask, at some point over coffee, to make yourself available to people to talk to you about experiences at work. Okay. Right. Any questions? Yeah.
How does that kind of interaction translate when the people aren't all in the same room? So if they're using some kind of online mapping tool.
Thank you. Very good question. Brilliant question, in fact. It takes us to the concept of epistemic objects. An epistemic object is a material artifact that creates meaning. And there has been some very interesting research being done on the use of PowerPoints. And this is not death by PowerPoint, it's not presentations, but people using PowerPoints as documents to create something. Okay? It could be a Google Docs. And there is evidence that the group work that goes through this epistemic object, this material artifact, actually increases the quality of the content that is being produced. It's not being used in a decision-making context, though. Okay? It's really about the content development. But that would be an interesting thing to explore and look at, how do you make decisions remotely. I've been looking at purely at the group interaction in the same room. Thank you for that. Yeah.
Thanks. I'd be interested to know if thanks very much. I'd be interested to know if you regard mind maps as an intermediary step only and to be dispensed with then once the process is complete, or do they remain as a repository of some sort?
You mean these maps?
Generally.
All these groups, once they have done the map, they have not necessarily, put them into a repository. And again, these are, difficult to say because they're just posted notes. But what I do find is that if you have to go and justify the decision you have made, take a company. If it's a board-level decision, and you use these types of mind mapping tools or epistemic objects, and you need to go to the organization and justify what you have done. The justification tends to be more logical, more well thought out, and more grounded than the decisions that you just make around the table. Because what you have done here is that you have engaged in some serious debate of pros and cons, various different options. I'm not quite sure if that answers your question, but...
I suppose it's the question about, I find this a kind of a... Oh, sorry, pardon me. Sorry, thanks. I find this where I differ with some other people who like mind maps, is that for me they're using for the process to extract your thoughts, to share them, all that kind of stuff, to communicate amongst the team. But then at the end of the process, it either gets internalized or converted into some artifact, like some document then that you then share, because most people I find don't receive mind maps as a document. They don't see them as such, So
yes,
so
hey, you have the answer.
Well, I use them all the time, and they absolutely are an end product as well. So in the leadership processes that I have, to have an artifact, either a software document or a big picture document, is reflecting the process that the people have been through, is all part and key to their ownership and responsibility of that process. And that's all extremely key to motivation, staying involved, to acceptance, to buy-in. So every single process I do has an end product, which is a mind map.
I've just got one more question down here.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Mikko. You mentioned when you started the video that they were all executives.
Yeah.
How does this work where you have a more varied elements within the group, from
Excellent.
say junior through to more senior personnel, where some of the juniors might feel that they don't want to, I mean, you alluded to earlier, they don't want to put their 2 pence worth in because they're frightened of upsetting the boss.
Yeah. That's an excellent question. Let me give you two answers. The first is that the research that I've done has been, or these experiments, have been done with both undergraduate students, whom I call inexperienced decision makers, postgraduate business students, and executives. And there really isn't any variation in terms of performance. Okay? In this case, this is fascinating. If you look at this lady here, okay, she was the most junior person in this group. And I'm not going to tell what organization this was. But she came to me and said, you know, Mikko, this is kind of fantastic. Because I came into this workshop. And in this organization, we have a culture that you don't talk to your senior people unless you are spoken to. Okay? 21st century and still goes on. And she said that this was amazing. Because for the first time, I was able to be in a group as the junior nobody and make a contribution. And she was incredibly active. Initially hesitant, but she was sucked in. And it is also a leveling device, because the focal point is the map. It's not the other person there. So it's democratic. Excellent question. Thank you.
Well, I'm going to say thank you very much, Mikko. Great, thank you.